Good evening and welcome to the Ford Hall Forum at Suffolk University. I'm Jen Bernardi, the Executive Director of the Ford Hall Forum, where our programs provoke thought and encourage you to listen, learn, and engage. Thank you so much for attending tonight's discussion, The Life of a Leader, with Gilad Sharon. You're in for a fascinating look at the life and career of former Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon through the eyes of his confidant, biographer, and youngest son. Allow me to take this time to thank the Ford Hall Forum's generous sponsors, including, among others, the Lowell Institute, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, the Barr Foundation, the Nellie Mae Education Foundation, and especially our partners at Suffolk University, which serves as the Forum's home base. We also would like to thank our season sponsor, the Boston Beer Company, makers of Sam Adams beer. I don't know why that always gets a laugh. They're a great company. Are you laughing because you think I'm going to give you free beer? I'm not. And now, time for the show. Our moderator, Wendy Ballinger, is the principal of Ballinger Consulting, a nonprofit development and organizational consulting firm. Her experience includes a decade of service as the executive director of the Ford Hall Forum, as well as staff positions in both the Massachusetts State Senate and the Institute of Politics at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. Ballinger is co-author of How the Press Affects Federal Policymaking, 6 case studies, with Martin Linsky, Jonathan Moore, and David Whitman. She received her BA and her MA from Tufts University, and she is a proud member of the Ford Hall Forum Board and our board treasurer. Please give a warm welcome to Wendy Ballinger.
Thanks so much, Jen. It's a real privilege to be here for what promises to be a fascinating evening. Tonight, I am privileged to introduce Gilad Sharon, the son and biographer of former Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. Certainly one of the best known and at times most controversial figures of the modern Middle East. Gilad Sharon has just published a biography of his father, Sharon, The Life of a Leader. Gilad Sharon is the youngest son of Ariel Sharon's 3 sons, and he has been a confidant of his father's throughout his life. Mr. Sharon holds a master's degree in economics and is a frequent columnist for an Israeli newspaper. A major in the Israel Defense Force Reserves, he currently manages his family's farm. And now I'd like to ask you to sit back for just a few minutes while we all see a brief video about Mr. Sharon and the book he has just published.
Well, I would get a phone call from the Prime Minister office, and the secretary would say, the Prime Minister wishes to know how many calves were born today. But I would deliver currently the information. It was the rain amount that fell that day, and he was in the middle of dealing with terror and fighting. So we had a moment of feeling from, something from the farm, warm feelings from home. My father's story of life is a unique story. I would say it's a biography that could have filled, 100 people's life. He managed to do so many things in so many fields. And a huge story like that, by nature, should be told. Since there's no person that is closer to my father than myself, that gives me a unique point of view. I felt a duty to share the memories that I collected during the years, the stories that I've heard about events that took place before I was born. This is about, with my father's handwriting, talking about the fact that he educated soldiers and officers in the army never to leave our men. And he was very upset with the fact that Massachusetts was left to die in Nablus while our forces were around. What's really interesting that my father's life is combined with the life of the young state of Israel. So personal events are well combined in the history of the country, the battles, the wars. The good thing about the roadmap that moving from one stage to the next one depends on fulfilling the full obligations on the previous stage. Unfortunately, the Palestinians never met their obligations. They never fought Hamas, They never fought the jihad and the other terror organizations, and so nothing came out of it. The mistake of the government that followed my father's when Ulmert was prime minister, he was willing to skip the first stages and go directly to deal with the other issues. And so we find ourselves today in square one. My father was no doubt a legendary leader. During his long years in the army, he set standards, he reached achievements, he led the IDF to great victories. He knew where he was heading, and when you have a target, it doesn't really matter if you go that way or this way. You know where you're going. The values that he always believed in, ensuring the life of the Jews and bringing more Jews to Israel from all over the world. Million Jews came from Russia during the 90s. It was a blessing, and we need more. And developing the country in order that we all have better life here. This is what he believed in, and this is what he was struggling to achieve.
And now it is my privilege for the very beginning of this evening to begin a conversation with Mr. Sharon. After I've had a chance to ask some questions, and he and I have talked a little bit about the book, we'll open it up to your questions. And as I told you before we came out here, I'm going to ask questions in roughly chronological order through the life of Ariel Sharon to try to talk about some of the major points. You describe in the book your father's early years as full of remarkable and daredevil military adventures, some of which even involved some trickery, but all of which involved a great deal of bravery. Were there any moments of which he was particularly proud of his participation in the birth of a nation, and any that you think he would have changed?
First, I want to say good evening. I'm excited to be here. Thank you all for coming in that rainy night. I appreciate it a lot. You're talking about, sorry, would you repeat the question?
As the country was being born,
Yeah.
your father was a key part of a number of military operations, which you describe his personal bravery. But looking at it from this perspective, are there things that he was particularly proud of, that he talked about a great deal when you were growing up, and also things you think he may have regretted in those early years?
My father could have been a farmer. Maybe he would. He could be a writer. His imagination and his abilities might have been going in another direction if Israel would not be attacked again and again. So actually this was not his first choice. He never thought of himself in the early years as someone who is going to have a military career. His first love was farming, and that's true. I remember our endless drives in the farm, driving between the sheep and the cattle. Now, my father had very hard time parting from the animals, even when they were not productive anymore. So I would say, Dad, if it would be up to you, we'd open an old age home for sheep and cows that do not give birth nor milk. He would just say, oh, just give her another chance. So if you ask me if I would say this was not his first choice. During the War of Independence, my father outstood already as a young officer. And he was the one that was chosen to lead the attack on Latun in order to open the road to Jerusalem that was cut off by our forces. The attack failed. He was badly wounded. His platoon was left alone on the battlefield. Out of his 35 platoon members, only 4 survived that awful day intact. All the rest were either killed or wounded. And he himself, he was left alone on the battlefield, badly wounded. His story of survival is no less than a miracle. I describe it, of course, in the book. But because of that awful day, the hot day, May 26th, 1948, he set the rule that became a value to the entire Israeli army, to the IDF. We do not leave our men behind. And that is very relevant today. That was the, when we were kids, he took us to that spot where he was lying, badly wounded, crawling, and on his way from the farm to Jerusalem, every day he was passing that place. There's no single time that I drive there and I'm not thinking about him in that awful day, awful hot and fire around, and he alone over there. So I would say this is the most remarkable event in that war, and that brought a value that is still being kept in Israel till today.
You actually covered both of my first two questions with that one answer, because I was going to ask about Unit 101, which is what you were talking about.
It
yes?
was a long one.
Yes.
Long answer.
No, it's a wonderful answer, but I'm going to skip during the Six-Day War in 1967, your father commanded an armored division, and in the book you described him as having an icy calm as he set his troops into motion. Can you talk a little bit about his role in the Six-Day War and how he looked back on that war in later years?
Well, it's very interesting because after the 67 war, suddenly all the terror attacks that we suffered during the 1950s and the 1960s were forgotten. And suddenly after the 67 war, after the West Bank and Gaza Strip became part of Israel, suddenly all the previous terror attacks were forgotten, and all of a sudden there was an excuse for that, as they call it, the occupation or so. But I mean, so for 19 years between 67 and 48, those territories were in Arab hands. Why didn't they establish a Palestinian state back then? And so in 67, the tiny little Israel in the center of the country, the wide is less than 10 miles, was in threat of elimination, as the common phrase was to wipe the Zionist entity, wiped off or
Wiped off the face of the earth, yes.
He was a division commander in the south. His mission was the most difficult one, to break through the main Egyptian stronghold in Katef. It was a brilliant battle. It's been taught all over the world since then. And that was his main act during the war. But I want to tell you about my father. After that great victory on that battle, it was the first day of the war, and he actually opened the road for the entire Israeli army into the Sinai. He was driving in his military vehicle in the Sinai, one of the roads. On the side road, he saw an Israeli soldier treat badly an Egyptian prisoner of war. He stopped the vehicle immediately, went down, sentenced the Israeli soldier to prison, because he always said, in a war you fight, that's the nature of it. But when a man is your prisoner, you got to act like a human being. This is my father.
Can we talk a little bit about how your father left the military? The interviews he gave to the New York and Los Angeles Times and his feelings about the conduct of the Yom Kippur War.
Excuse me?
When he left the military?
Yes.
He left it at a time he gave two interviews to American newspapers. The
1973?
Yeah.
I don't remember those interviews. I mean, I was 7. My English now is not that good, so when I was 7...
Well, talk more broadly about the Yom Kippur War and how he felt about that war.
Well, first, before the Yom Kippur War, he did something that was his first act in his public career was founding the Likud party. He took 5 small opposition parties and created a big one big party. And by doing that, he actually gave a real meaning to the Israeli democracy. Because for the first time, there was a real chance to have change in power in Israel after decades of the Labour Party ruling the country. And that's what allowed Menachem Begin to form his government 4 years later. The Yom Kippur War was a bitter war, was a terrible war that the Israeli leadership allowed the country to be surprised at. So they ignored all the pre-war signs and actually allowed the Israeli army to be caught by surprise. However, the bitter crossing battle, crossing the Suez Canal that my father conducted, and it was a bitter battle, managed to bring the change in the war. When the Israeli forces were at the end of the war, 100 kilometers from Cairo, with no Egyptian force that could stop them. And that was after being caught by surprise. So I would say this is one of the biggest victories that my father and the IDF, the Israeli army, had ever. He lost good friends in that war. His closest friend was killed quite next to him at the crossing Suez Canal site. We lost about 3,000 men in that war, and for us, each person is. I mean, you see, we give one, we take one, we give 1,000. I mean, you see what how our feelings about our men are, and this is the Yom Kippur War. It started as a Israeli trauma, and it still is, but it ended in a great victory.
Your father left the military right after that.
By the way, I remember after he crossed the canal, he called home. And so he was talking to me. I was 7, as I said. He said, "I'm talking to you from Africa." The other side of the canal, the west side. So now I was not sure what was going on. I said, "Are you a prisoner of war?" I mean, I guess he wouldn't get a phone. But his voice was, as usual, very self-assured, very strong, and he was laughing, of course not. So yeah, after that, he left the army before the war. He was there as a reserve division commander.
And he had already made an early transition into politics, but what pushed him from military to politics? I mean, what made him make that choice?
Well, he was serving the country since the age of 17. And so it was obvious that he was not interested in business or anything like that. He was serving the country, and it was the natural way to continue.
Under Menachem Begin, your father was appointed Minister of Agriculture. And at some point in the book, you say that he saw the military and the agricultural aspects of Israel as two sides of the same coin. Can you talk a little bit about how those two areas, which seem very different in the United States, we do not typically have politicians who are farmers. Well, Jimmy Carter actually might. I catch myself, but there are not a lot of them throughout American history. Can you talk about how your father saw them as so closely intertwined? I mean, he went back and forth between cabinet positions for defense or security and agriculture.
First, in November 1977, Anwar Sadat, the Egyptian president, came to Israel. My father was a minister of agriculture then, the first question that Sadat asked while before he went down from his plane, he was asking, "Is General Sharon is here?" And he was answered, "Yes, he is." When he was shaking hands, he approached my father and said, "I was trying to catch you there in the desert near the Suez Canal." And my father said, "You have a chance to catch me as a friend now." And they did have a very good relations. I remember one of the visits that my father visited Sadat in his palace in Cairo, and Sadat, who wanted to develop areas, mostly in the western desert, in order to grow wheat and feed the Egyptians. He asked my father to go and tour that area. Because, as you know, my father had both sides, the military and the farming, the agriculture. And so my father found himself sitting in the presidential plane, and his two pilots were two Egyptian jet pilots that only a few years before, only several years before, were trying to kill him at the canal. They were attacking the bridgehead. And flying there with the two Egyptian jet pilots, he got the feeling of what peace is about. I mean, here you were trying to attack my forces and myself, and now we are all flying around because we want to grow wheat. So it was better like that. And the conditions were much better. It was the Egyptian Air Force One, after all. Now, Israel borders were shaped in some areas by the settlements, the kibbutzim and the moshavim. To answer your question, I'll have to go back to 1947. November 29th, 1947, the UN Resolution 181, what is known as the Partition Resolution. And that resolution suggested establishing two states, a Jewish one and an Arab one. The Jews accepted that resolution, and the Arabs rejected it. If the Palestinians would accept the Partition Resolution back then, they would have a Palestinian state at the age of Israel today. They could have 63 years old state by now, but they rejected it. They went to war and joined by the Arab armies in order to eliminate Israel. There would not be a single Palestinian refugee. Yeah. But as we know, they chose differently, unfortunately. One of their arguments today, going to the UN, is that resolution. Well, where have you been all those years? Now, the resolution was based on, and there was one before, in 1937, the Peel Committee suggested a different kind of division of the country, and one of their criterions you say?
Criteria,
yeah. Was who lives where, and so places that were held by kibbutzim or moshavim. Are you all familiar with kibbutzim and moshavim? It's a cooperative way of living in Israel. Communities. For instance, in El Hama in the ceasefire agreements of 1949 was considered as a part of Israel, but we did not have a settlement there. And so the Syrians managed to push us from that area. But places that when you have community, you have to defend them, and so this was the connection between the two things. It was a long answer. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. And it's actually a perfect segue into my next question, because under Menachem Begin, your father was also chairman of the Ministerial Committee on Settlements. and he embraced the growing settler movement. But over time, his views changed, or at least appeared to change. I mean, if we watch history, can you talk about his early thoughts and the progression over time, how he viewed the settlements?
The settlements were chosen in order to ensure, let's say, about the major three problems that we had. The problem that we had a 10 miles wide country. This is less than a usual farm in Texas, all right? The whole size of the country is less than New Jersey. It's a tiny little country. So the reach above the coastline, above our only international airport. I mean, we have something near Eilat, but the Ben Gurion Airport, the major, about 80% of the population, and all our infrastructures facilities, they are all concentrated in the coastlines. And so, to sit above the coastline, this was the first thing. The second was ensure Jerusalem as a united city. It was like a belt of settlements around Jerusalem to prevent the possibility that Jerusalem would become one urbanic city between Bethlehem and Ramallah. And the third one was as what we refer in Israel as the Eastern Front. And this is a scenario, but this is not a fictional, because it happened, that Israel would be attacked from the east. And that happened in 48, that happened in 67, and that happened in 73. And so protect Israel from being attacked through forces that will come from Jordan. Jordan did not attack on 73, but Iraqi forces went to Syria that did attack. And in the previous wars, Saudi forces that we don't have any dispute with, but they joined Iraqi forces, Jordanians in some of the wars, and Syrians, of course. So to defend Israel from the east. But let me surprise you. Already, my father was talking about a Palestinian state, demilitarized one, on part of the land, but he was talking about that already in the late 1970s. And so he knew that I guess not all the settlements would stay. I mean, he withdrew from Gaza. But there are areas that we will have to keep forever in our hands, because otherwise our security, Israeli security, will be in danger. And that's how he saw it.
So his opinions didn't change over time in terms of the settlements? They didn't evolve from someone who wanted to expand the settlements as far as possible into someone who was willing to unilaterally give back some of the land? I mean, that's certainly been the common wisdom.
The Gaza Strip is one thing, and the areas that he thought that were critical for our security should be left in our hands forever. I mean, we went out from Gaza. Now, the Palestinians in Gaza could have it all. The whole world would give them money. I mean, it could be, the best place in the Middle East. But instead, we got rockets, we got attacks. There are rockets that are sometimes falls in our farm. We live about 4 miles from the Gaza Strip. Our children's school is often being fired at. But regarding the West Bank, there are areas that will be, or should be, in our hands forever, because we cannot put our security in anyone else's hands. And that was proven time after time. And I mean, I don't see any really, any changes here. I mean, this was his this was the principle. You know, if he saw that all the places will remain eventually, no. But major areas that we do need, yes, definitely.
Moving further forward, can you talk a little bit about the visit by your father, and you were with him, to the Temple Mount in September of 2000?
First, it was not my father's first visit to the temple. I mean, it's a free country. Everybody can go everywhere.
He was not unaware that it would cause controversy when he went.
Well, Barak, in his negotiations with the Palestinians, he was willing to give up parts of Jerusalem that nor the Knesset or the Israeli public would agree to. And so, my father was protesting against those concessions. By the way, after a few months, when the election came, my father beat Barak almost 2-1, and that proves that the Israelis did not approve that Barak's concessions.
It was certainly, in the book you mentioned, that the Mitchell report confirmed that it was not the sole cause, certainly, of the Al-Aqsa Intifada.
Absolutely.
But
I mean,
did your father expect the drama that surrounded it? Did he expect the effects, the after effects, whether or not it caused the Intifada? And it certainly, I'm not certainly saying it did, but it created a great deal of international drama.
Well, no, he did not see that in advance. But let me ask you a question, if I may. May I ask one question? What's the connection between? We didn't get into the mosque. We went on the area between.
Mm-hmm.
What is the connection between that and between exploding buses full of children? I mean, what's the connection? So,
I'm not suggesting there is one, but it was a grand gesture, and it was a gesture meant to cause some kind of effect. So, my interest was in seeing afterwards.
It was not his first time on the temple mountain, Har HaBayit as we call it. You know, it's the place of the two temples.
Right.
Aren't we entitled? You know, since '67, Jews were prevented from going to the Temple Mountain for hundreds of years. The first time that Muslims, Christians, and Jews are allowed to go up and pray, or but Jews are not allowed to pray there, but that can go and freely to all the holy places in Jerusalem, is only now. Before '67, Jews cannot go there.
I know you said earlier that your father always believed that no soldier should be left behind, and you referenced it, but I'd like you to talk a little more about how do you think your father would have felt about the deal struck last week for the freedom of Gilad Shalit?
Shalit was held without anyone able to visit him, not even the Red Cross. This is illegal, immoral, this is not human. You could see how he looked like when he came back to Israel and how the Palestinian prisoners looked like. I mean, there's a difference. And so we do not leave our men behind.
And so you think it was your father would have approved of the...
I don't know what were the exact conditions, or I mean, what we could have done or not. If there was another option. I'm not suggesting that this is the only option to bring our men back. I remember the story of Ghibli, who was a sergeant in the paratroopers. He fell into fell in Jordanians. He was captured by Jordanians army. He was in prison in Jordan. My father was the paratroop commander, paratroopers commander at that time, and so there were a series of, and I'm describing it in the book, series of action to catch Jordanian soldiers, and then the Ghibli was replaced. So, but you know, sometimes, but when you have a prisoner that is held by a country, you know, that the Red Cross visits him, you know what's going on. I mean, it's something normal. But when a terrorist organization is holding a guy for more than almost 5.5 years, or I don't know how long was it? 5 years and 4 months. No one knows what's going on. So I mean, you should do anything that you can in order to bring him back home. But you know what? I had a few interesting comments from Arab countries, and they would say, "I wish my country would take care of me as Israel was worried about Shalit. I wish my country would care about me so much, instead of shooting me in the streets, they would do anything to bring me back." You know. Well, it might seem as weakness, but I don't see that that way. We care about our people.
I'm going to wrap up. One last question from me so I can turn it over to the audience. But what do you think and what do you hope your father's legacy will be?
My father will always be remembered as a historical leader. In Israel, love towards him crossed every political boundary. He enjoyed unmatchable support. But you know what? Not only in Israel. He had very close relations with Arab leaders. I remember the Egyptian president on December 2004 saying, "Sharon is the only chance for peace." This was said after 4 years of continuous war against Palestinian terror. And I remember the story about Abdallah, King Abdallah. King Abdallah, who inherited his respect and love towards my father from his father, King Hussein. And when my father was prime minister, they were so close that Abdallah wanted to give my father as a present a beautiful, purebred Arabian horse. Now my father told the king, "Look, in the prime minister's office basement, we have a room for presents that the prime minister gets. What will they do with the horse down there? Will they tie the horse there? Who's going to feed the horse?" And so the Jordanians dropped the subject for a while. But then Israeli paper published photographs from our farm with the horses in the background, the horses in the stable. And so the whole issue was raised again. And we were just that close from a diplomatic incident. The king was insulted. Why was my father refusing to get his present? And so at the end, the horse was left in the king's stables in Jordan. But sometimes when I ride my horse, Bedouin, sometimes they ask me, "Is that the king's horse?" Now my horse is a beautiful horse, but it is not a gift from the king. It's mine. And it was not only in our area. Prime Minister Blair, while I was doing my research for the book, on March 2010, he told me, "I had huge respect for your father. He was a courageous man and a visionary leader." And when I was invited to the Oval Office, to President Bush on July 2008, he told me, "I admire your dad." And so I think this is how he will always be remembered.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now it's time for questions from the rest of you. So if you would come to the microphones and line up. I would ask that people keep your questions brief. You're certainly entitled to express your opinions, but we just want to get as many people as possible the opportunity. Just hang on. No, we'll turn it on when it's time to start. So just hang on. So if each of you would keep your questions brief, I'd be grateful. If they start to go on too long, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up. So, but go ahead.
As you were speaking about humanitarian issues, and how do you take it that Israel has a military and Palestine, the state, does not have a military, but yet you guys still continue to give them curfews? And do you also recognize a genocide happening in Palestine by the Israeli troops?
Saying that the Palestinians do not have troops, I would say most of the terror attacks during the years that my father was prime minister were committed by Palestinian Authority forces. 417, the presidential guard, the Tanzim. So I wouldn't say that they don't have any forces. The problem that the forces, instead of fighting terror, were committing terror.
You did not answer one of my questions about the curfews in Palestine, sir.
Sorry?
The curfews in Palestine.
He's asking about the curfews in Palestine.
What's the curfew?
He's times by which people have to be in their homes. They can't be on the streets. So keeping people off the streets in the evening.
You know, I don't know if you're a young man. I don't think that you have kids. But if you would have, I guess you would feel very bad if your kid's school would be fired upon. Or if your school bus, my kid's school bus, the yellow one, was driving. Somebody took an anti-tank missile, aimed, and pushed the trigger while knowing it's a yellow bus. So we do everything to protect our kids, all right? And our measures are, I would say, by far being humanitarian than what you see in the Arab countries for their own people.
Over here.
Yeah, I'm sure your father will be remembered for many other things too, such as the massacre at Kibbutz with the infamous Unit 101, such as the massacre at Sabra Shatila when he was defense minister, and such as the massacre at Jenin in 2002 when he was PM, along with a long list of other heinous crimes which are too numerous to list right now. So I'm really curious to know, sincerely, was there some sort of traumatic experience in this man's childhood that later turned him into a brutal sociopath that he became during his political career?
Do I get the impression that you don't like my father, right?
I think that's reasonable to say.
Hold on. If you want to ask a question, I'm going to ask you to come down to the microphone. We're being taped, and yelling from the audience is not going to help any part of the conversation. Everyone in this room is welcome to come down to the microphones and to ask questions.
There was not a massacre in Kibbutz. Unfortunately, when democracies like the US or Israel fighting terror, you know, sometimes civilians do get hurt. But the difference is the terrorists are looking for civilians intentionally.
I suppose those women and children who were murdered at the same time are quote-unquote terrorists to your father, who anybody who's in the way of the settlements
You talk so fast and my English is so, you know...
it's not your English I'm concerned about, it's your morals that I'm more concerned about.
You need to slow down a little bit, sir. It really is difficult to understand you from the stage. If you have something to say, I'd also ask you to say it civilly. Please say it just a little more slowly. And then we'll go to the next microphone.
I want to go to your question about Sabra and Shatila.
Uh-huh.
Oh, sure. So it was a heavy crime, a terrible tragedy, but we should remember those were Christian Arabs who murdered Muslims Arabs.
Your own commission, the Kahan Commission, held him personally responsible and said he should never serve in government again, which was the best advice any of your commissions have ever given, I think.
You're wrong about the commission conclusion. They said that there was not a single Israeli that was involved or that knew in advance. They said he should have known. That's what they said. And you know what? Time magazine published an article on February 1983 suggesting that my father encouraged the Christian to murder the Palestinians. And so my father immediately decided to sue. I was with him on the very first day of the trial in New York, and the days after, and both courts in the United States and in Israel found that that was false, defamatory, and that the people in the magazine acted carelessly. And so all you say is wrong. You're wrong.
Also found him responsible. So both investigative bodies found him responsible.
So,
as well as the UN rapporteur in Jenin in 2002 and many other incidences throughout the years, starting with his involvement in Haganah and going all the way up to his death in 2006 when he was still expanding the settlements. And as Catherine Ashton, the European Foreign Commissioner, has said, reminded us again in August in 2011, all settlements under international law are completely illegal. So there's no excuse for any type of settlements in the territories. When he was housing minister during the 70s, he was furiously expanding those settlements, and he used his post as agriculture commissioner to do the exact same thing.
You know, regarding the West Bank, why wasn't that any Palestinian state established between 48 and 67? And you know what? Let me ask you another question. Why would the Palestinians, in their own charter that was published on June 6, 1964, 3 years before the Six-Day War, they wrote in Article 24 that they have no wishes to have any sovereignty over the West Bank or Gaza? Why would they say that? You know why? Because what you refer as the occupation is the excuse and not the reason. And the problem is that we were never accepted. Our right to have a Jewish state in the area was never accepted in the area. And that's the reason we are not shown on the maps in Egypt, in which we have peace treaties, or in Jordan, and of course not in the Palestinian Authority, because they do not recognize our right to have a Jewish state in Israel.
I'm going to go to another questioner at this point because I think you've had more than enough opportunity. If we have a chance, you can come back later. Go ahead, sir. Just wait a second. Go ahead.
Hello. All right. As a Palestinian American who strongly dislikes your father, I would like to take the time to thank you for coming today. And my question was, your father once told Shimon Peres 10 years ago in October a quote, and I've always been wondering about this quote. He said, "Every time we do something, you tell me America will do this and will do that. I want to tell you something very clear. Don't worry about American pressure on Israel. We, the Jewish people, control America, and Americans know it." What did he mean by that?
That's false. He never said something like that.
An Israeli radio reported that he said that to Shimon Peres.
That's false. That's false. He would never say that because he never saw
But
that.
it's not just, I didn't pull this out of nowhere. It's widely known that he said that.
Well, I mean, you believe that, but I'm telling you that's not right. So, you know,
If you want to speak, please come down to the microphone. Everyone is welcome to offer their views. We're happy to hear all views at this point.
Shimon Peres even admit that he said that, and he was actually told that he should watch what he said, for there will be a lot of drama in the international community.
I know my father pretty well, and I'm telling you, this is not something that he thought or believed in or would ever say, and that's it.
I suspect you're going to have to agree to disagree. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
I'd also like to take the time to thank you for coming to Suffolk University. You recently visited New York to talk about your book, and you were asked if you felt remorse for what happened at the Sabra and Shatila refugee camps, where thousands of Palestinians were slaughtered under IDF control when Sharon was defense minister. You said, and I quote, "No, we did not murder those Palestinians." My question is, why, under Sharon's authority, did he allow those Christians to enter the camp, and why did he not stop the killings?
First, those was Christian Arabs who killed Muslims Arabs. No Jews were involved there. And second, it was their own capital. They wanted to free it. I mean, this was not our business inside who's going to rule Beirut. We just wanted the PLO go out from there because they were firing at our settlements and our towns and our cities in the north. The whole Galilee was being fired for years. Now, the Galilee is full with military targets, but no, they were aiming on Kiryat Shmona, on Metula, on Nahariya. They were looking for civilians, and so the IDF got in order to stop that. And it was a terrible tragedy, you know, not the first one and not the last one in Lebanon. In 76, Christians killed Palestinians in Tel Zata. In 76, Palestinians killed Christians in Damour. Killed them in Aishia. Shiites killed Christians. Christians killed Christians. Syrians killed Palestinians. They all kill each other, but no one seemed to care. Only when they, you know, thought that they might get the Israelis involved somehow, everybody started to care about that.
Going back to what you first said, I know the Jews did not kill them. It was the Christians, but Sharon was defense minister, so he had the power to stop them. But why didn't he?
Well,
Sorry, we need speakers at the microphone only. You can't be heard by the rest of the audience.
he did not see in advance that he did not think that something like that would happen. Unfortunately, it happened. Not for the first time in Lebanon, and not for the last time, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Let's go to the question over here.
I'm wondering, and it may be unfair to ask you what your father might think of something that he's not been able to observe himself, but what do you think the future of Israel and its international relations will look like after the past year and a half of democratic reforms that we've seen around the world? And what do you think your father would have thought of those things given his history with the countries surrounding Israel?
I'm not sure that we see democratic reforms. We did see elections in Tunisia, but in Egypt, for instance, Mubarak left and military junta in power now. I mean, freedom of speech is even less than it used to be. In Syria, we can all see what is going on. In Saudi Arabia, women might be able to drive in 4 years. I mean, that would be a big achievement. And so I'm not sure that we are going to see Western democracies like we would wish to see. Most probably we'll see more of the same or even worse. Radically Islamic regimes might take power. I don't know. And so we have, because of that, to be very careful regarding who we give and what do we give.
Go ahead.
Thank you for coming. There was an interesting article published, I'm not sure if it was this morning or yesterday's New York Times, which discussed Condoleezza Rice's memoir, which is to be released soon. And it discussed the plans that, the confidential conversations that Ehud Olmert had with Mahmoud Abbas regarding a potential secret settlement agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And basically it outlined that, Olmert put on the table, here's the map of Jerusalem, the outlying areas, let's internationalize Jerusalem, here's what we're going to do, here's how we're going to divide up the settlement and do a land exchange, roughly equivalent to, I think, 94% of the West Bank. Was that something that was initiated by your father? Would he approved of it based on Kadima, or is that something that Olmert was only put into that position to do based on your father's incapacity?
No, my father never thought of anything like that and would not approve that.
Go ahead, sir.
This question isn't about your father. It's about your perceptions. I'd be interested in. I think here in the United States, I've followed the conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, for as long as 30 years or so, and I think in the United States in the last 2, 3, 4 years, there's been a bit of a change in terms of the sort of American perception of the conflict, and I think I'm not speaking out of turn to say that perhaps a larger percentage, I don't know what percentage, but a larger percentage of Americans are starting to feel a certain impatience with Israel. We're an ally, Israel and the United States are allies, but I think there's less, I sense from what I read and from what I hear when I talk to people, there's less patience for Israel. Not that people think Israel's all wrong and the Palestinians are all right, or vice versa, but sort of a sense that Israel is the more empowered of the actors, and that there's just an impatience that Israel perhaps doesn't take advantage of the things it could to stimulate peace, or to stimulate peace talks, or just to get the process moving. You're probably familiar with J Street, which is developed in response to, I think, the sort of long-time traditional position in the United States, of support for Israel, sort of an overwhelming support. Now it's a more questioning support. So my question, sort of a long preamble, but my question is, in Israel, is there a perception within Israel of this feeling within the United States, within this, what is the mood of the United States? Do people in Israel talk about it? Do they feel it? And also within Israel, is there any, I read Haaretz and Jerusalem Post, is there a widening division within Israel regarding what Israel can or should do to sort of, move the process. So it's a two-part question. Perception of the United States within Israel and our political feelings, and then what's the tenor of within the Israeli people for what's going on?
A small question.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give shorter answer. No, it's all right.
It's a good question.
First, about the ties between the U.S. and Israel. I believe that these relationships are strong and based on mutual values of freedom and justice, and we share the same war against radical Islamic terrorism, and I think the ties are strong as they used to be, because the base is the same base. Regarding to what we can do, or what was the second question?
To just follow up on your first one, does Israel sense any sort of, I don't know what the word is, impatience or less, does Israel feel in the United States some of these growing trends? Do you know about J Street, for example?
I don't feel that.
Are you aware of J Street, the organization that was developed sort of in response to AIPAC, the lobbying group, in the traditional Israel lobbying group in the United States?
We're going to need to wind this up
Yeah.
shortly.
I mean, are you aware of those organizations?
I think I heard about that one. I'm not sure that I'm fully familiar with their actions, but
Yeah.
I don't see any decline in the relations. I see nothing like that, and I'm happy about it.
Yeah. Okay, and then the second part then is the mood within Israel. What can you tell us about the division or not division? What are the breakdown left, middle, right in Israel itself about the peace process or lack thereof?
I don't think there is a big difference today between the parties in Israel. All of them agree to establishing a Palestinian state, but the big question is what would be the Palestinians' boundaries. And of course it should be demilitarized, because we suffered enough from terrorism during the years. The whole idea behind Oslo Accords was solving the problem in peaceful way, and we got a lot of terror after that. I think there's a kind of consensus in the big parties regarding how it should be conducted. I'm not sure that the actual, some of them would say we should start negotiations right away. For myself, I believe that this is not, if the Palestinians would ask my opinion, I'm sure they would not, but they can have a Palestinian state right now. Israel do not have final borders, so what? We have prosperity, the restaurants are full. If the dream is a Palestinian state, why don't you take it now? The years will pass, you will enjoy prosperity, Israelis will learn to trust you, live with no terrorism, and things will be easier. But if you go to the UN, you say, we want to get everything that we demand without negotiate, why bother negotiate? If they can get it all without giving anything. So I hope I answered your question in a way.
On this side, I'm going to jump back to people, because both of you have already had a chance to speak, and just in the interest, you may speak again, there's no question, but I want to go to the young woman behind to give everybody a chance as we work through. Stay where you are.
It's more of a comment, not a question. You talked about Gilad Shalit and how he was treated in the 5 years he was prisoned. Let me just tell you something. Gilad Shalit, when he was arrested, he was armed. While most of the Palestinians who were arrested and that are now in the Israeli jails, they were arrested illegally. Some of them are under 18 years old. And they've been on a hunger strike for 20-something days because they were not treated right. I don't think you have the right to talk about humanity because you don't know what humanity is.
Thank you.
Would you like to say anything in response? Would you like to respond?
You think that he was not entitled to have the Red Cross visit him, or?
Hold on. You can't speak from the audience. We can't hear you. That's right. Come up and get in line. And if you want to respond, come back.
The Palestinians in the Israeli prisons, not all of them are allowed to be visited.
No, the
By their
families,
parents.
buses full of families goes there.
Lies. No. I have friends who their fathers have been in prison since they were born, and they could not visit their parents in jail.
So you think that people that responsible for exploding buses should be out there in the streets?
Not all of the people who are in jail exploded buses.
And the ones that are responsible for that, do you think that they should be in prison?
At least they should be treated as humans.
But
they
you
don't get medical care in prison.
Oh, they do not? Did you see how he looked when he went out, and how do they look?
He was in a better shape than they did.
Oh, all right. So we disagree here.
I'm going to go to the other side for the next question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to ask a question. Thank you for this opportunity. I want to ask about the disengagement from Gaza. Obviously, this was a really hotly debated issue in Israel. And I want to ask now in retrospect, now that some time has passed, do you still support your father's decision? Would you take it back? I mean, was this politically advantageous for Israel? What are your thoughts? Advantageous.
Was it a political benefit to Israel, the withdrawal from the Gaza?
Well, there was a consensus in Israel that if we would have a peace agreement with the Palestinians, we would not be sitting in Gaza. So the question that was left was, should we wait for an agreement that might never arrive, or should we do what is best for us? And he, in a great leadership spirit, he took the decision and executed it. Now, people say that the rockets that are fired towards Israeli towns are the outcome of the moving out from Gaza. But the rocket started before. The first rocket on Sderot, near where we live, were fired on April 16, 2001. But our ability to fight terror from Gaza was limited. And so if you ask me if it was the right action, I think it was.
Thank you.
Again, I'm going to go here just because you will get to speak, but I want to give everybody a voice first, so go ahead.
Hi. I also don't like you or your father. But a lot of people...
Speak louder. It's hard for us to hear you.
A lot of people find it hilarious how the people of Israel left a Holocaust and created one. How do you feel about that?
The Israeli did not take anyone and put them in gas chambers, all right? So, show some respect, will you?
I'm not talking about that, about how you
you're
killed
not talking about
a
it.
lot of people. Still killing, no matter how you killed them, you still killed them. They ended up dead in some way. And you keep recognizing how the people or your children got blown up in buses. People of Palestine got hurt too, and you don't recognize that in any way. I don't hear you saying that you're upset from their side either, or that you want peace.
I'm upset with every loss of life, but let me tell you that when terrorists are intentionally hide among civilians, and so when you fight them, sometimes civilians do get hurt, but terrorists are intentionally seeking for civilians targets, and this is the difference.
So are you saying that all the people of Palestine are terrorists?
Sorry?
Are you saying that all the people of Palestine are terrorists by saying the comment?
No, and they're not being arrested, as you know.
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to clarify one thing for the air. It's I think you need to start differentiating between terrorism and a jihad. A jihad is a struggle. So when somebody's family gets lost and they have nothing else, they're inside a struggle. And I think this is where the bus bombings do come and people do commit suicide. So a jihad is a struggle because something happened. They just don't call themselves a jihad out of nowhere. But to move on to my questions is, you started off by saying that Israel in 1948 had this 10-mile radius of a country, and they had ideas of expansion. by expansion, you went in there forcefully, and it's in history that it happened forcefully. Don't you think that Israel was the first one to initiate force and regress the Palestinians back and give them less and 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 less land and also freedom? That's question number one. Could you please answer that for me?
I think I should refresh your memory. The Palestinians rejected the partition plan on 47. If they would accepted it, the Palestinians would have a Palestinian state by now. The reason that they have less and less is because they never was happy with what was offered. On 1937, the Peel Commission offered them almost the whole country. The Jews accepted it. The Palestinians rejected it. 1947, they were offered a little bit less. Jews accepted. Arabs rejected. Opened the war. All the Arab army came. Why didn't you take it back then? Why didn't you establish a Palestinian state before 67? This is what you're demanding right now. Why didn't you do it? It was in Arab hands. East Jerusalem was in Arab hands as well. Why didn't you do it?
Okay, can I please talk? So you guys were given...
Will you answer?
I will try to give you the best answer that I know, just like how you're speaking out of your best knowledge, supposedly. So I think the best answer is if somebody was to try to create a country inside the middle of the United States today and even give up one state, one minor state or one minor city in the United States and try to call that a country, I think we would all stand here as United States Americans and citizens and fight for that piece of land.
There was not a state over there. Nobody had a country over there.
You
know what?
There were
What are you
Palestinians
saying?
over
Are
there.
you suggesting that we don't have a right for a Jewish state? What are you suggesting?
I never suggested that, and that never came out of my mouth. And right now, you're trying to put words in my mouth, and I never try to put words in your mouth. So let's stay on that mutual respect. I think I'm wasting my time with questions. Thank you very much. And a letter will be going out to Suffolk, along with a lot of petitions for bringing. I was happy to kind of have you here to maybe tell us some truths, but instead all we got was ignorance of answers and also a lot of lies, and I'm very sad about that, and that's all I have to say.
I'm gonna ask you again your duplicate question, so go ahead, ma'am, and then I'll come over to you.
I'm not sure that I have such a great, question to ask you, but I'm an American Jew. I've visited Israel many times. I understand, as a Jew, what Gilad is trying to say, which is the basic principles of all of Jews are that we give. We want to give. And that I'm so sad to be here today to hear that you don't hear that we want to give as Jews, as Israeli Jews, American Jews, Palestinians, we want to give you something. But recently on the news, I'm reading 81 missiles are being shot out of Palestine into the Negev. And we're constantly defending, and it's a continuous argument.
What's the time? I have it.
And what can we do is my question, to stop the arguing and the fighting back and accept that Jews, that Israel wants to give to you if we could have peace. And I maybe you can comment. I don't know if it's a question or what, but I hate to see this beautiful presentation disturbed, by the argument, when all we're trying to say is that we want you to have the Palestinian state, but please stop shooting missiles and hurting and shooting school buses in schools.
Excuse me, sir. Thank you.
But
I want to say something.
could you
No, it's all right.
accept?
That's what I need her to wrap up.
How can you accept the fact that we want to give you, that we want peace, and we're so sorry for the mistakes, but when you're being attacked, as Israel has been surrounded, the whole country at one point. When we talk about Ariel, he was just a man, a young 17-year-old too, who had to defend, a country, a state of Israel, and try to make.
Gilad Sharon was an Israeli.
Yeah, we hear you. Believe me.
Ma'am, I need to ask you to
we
wrap
want
up
to
your
give
comment.
to you, but the arguing and then the shooting, the missiles causes a defense mechanism.
Ma'am, I need to ask you to wrap up your comment. It's gone on a little bit. Do you have a response before we go to the next question? I need you to wrap up your comment, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, what I have to say about that, Israel won all the wars. This is the only country who won all the wars and still is willing to give up what she won. No other state ever was willing to do that. Now, we were ready to do what the Egyptian or the Jordanian wouldn't do. The Egyptian or the Jordanian would not give the Palestinian state in the place that they were holding, the West Bank and Gaza. And the Palestinians were not demanding that. 19 years, everybody was sitting quietly until 67. Only terror attacks against Israel. But no one sought to establish a Palestinian state. Why was that? Because what you refer as is the occupation thing. This is the excuse and not the reason, because we had terror attacks before.
We're going to try to get to the last three questioners who are in line. Sir, go ahead.
Good evening, sir. I would like to ask you a question. We both don't speak good English, so I'll make it simple.
Yours is better, I guess.
Yes, so before I ask you my question, there's a difference between the word fight and the word war. War and fight are different. And now I'm going to ask my question, because when you win a fight, you don't win a war. Or you don't. When you win the war, then you want to fight. Now, my question is...
He's making a distinction between war and fighting.
Yes,
Go ahead.
because actually I think you misunderstood and you said war instead of fight. So my question is, if we were here sitting in this, and this is Palestine, and we're all from different religions, different countries, and we all respect each other. I have friends who are Jews, I have friends who are Muslim, I have friends who are Christians, and I love them all. But if we're all from all over this world, and you had the most powerful abilities to kick us all out and sit here for 100 years, after 100 years, not after 75 years, would that make you own this property? Yes or no? Explain my question, please.
He is asking, I believe he is asking whether simply Israel's being there for a number of years automatically gives them the right to the land.
So you deny our right to have a Jewish state?
I don't deny your right to have a Jewish state, but not over other people's state. It's your right to eat, to live, but it's not your right to eat, to go take somebody else's food to live, and this person dies. I'm saying if we were all in Palestine and we're all from over the world, and you have the power to kick everybody out for 100 years, after 100 years, does that permanently make you on that thing, on that Palestine country?
This is a legal question? I'm not a lawyer. I mean, I don't get your questions.
No, I don't want your lawyer. I want your perception, sir. I want your opinion. I want to hear what you have in mind.
I think I explained it roughly. He seems to be asking whether the mere fact of
Maybe it's
Israel's
my bad
existence
English, I don't know.
on land is.
So do I.
think it's your bad English. Have you made your point? Are you comfortable?
Yes,
I mean,
can you just explain it for him, please?
He seems to be asking whether or not the fact that Israel has been where they have been for as long gives them the rights over the people who were there prior.
We
he's
had a
asking about
Jewish
the people.
state 3,000 years ago in the land of Israel.
Okay, was it only a Jewish state?
He's asking, was it only a Jewish state, or were there other?
For this question, sir, I'm sorry to cut you. I want to ask this friend right here, the Jew. I don't know her, but I want to tell you. You want an opinion? You want a peaceful reason?
We're going to keep the questions directed here and not. You can talk after the program if you want to. Okay.
You can have one second. You can have a state that's called Palestine. Palestine was not for Muslims. Muslims, yes, they have religious places, but not only. Christians have religious places. Jesus, Allah, and Jewish. It's everybody's religious place. So what religion can't take it? Muslim can't take it by themselves. Christians can't do that. Jews can't do that. It's for everybody.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to wrap up now. Do you want to respond?
I'm not sure I get the point, but
I'll take English class and come.
That's fine. That's fine. Go ahead, sir. We've heard. Probably going to get to about 3 more questions. We're going to have to wrap up. So go ahead.
Hello, sir. Thank you for coming to Boston and everything, first of all. And I would like to say, as a human being looking at the Israel and Palestinian conflict, I'm not Arab, by the way. As a matter of fact, my mother's Jewish. And looking at that, I can see that there's a clear humanitarian crisis in Palestine where kids are not being fed, where people don't have enough food and things like that. And Israel is blocking this. Now, you might say that you came out of Gaza, but you're clearly blocking it. And there's a clear, please. There's a clear humanitarian crisis here. And please don't tell me that there isn't a crisis, because that's fact. And Israel, I mean, regardless of the rockets and everything that are being attacked, and regardless of that, just because somebody's doing that doesn't mean that the kids in Palestine deserve to be hungry and their fathers away from them. Not everybody in Palestine is a criminal. And this is just from looking at from a third-party perspective. And what do you have to say for that? I mean, clearly they're suffering, and what is the justification for that? One missile that came to you?
You know, Gaza has a border with Egypt. They can get everything from Egypt. I mean, they get all the missiles, all the rockets, all the explosives, all the weapons. I mean, they can get everything they need from Egypt. Are we responsible for Gaza? Why don't you take it from? Why don't they take it from Egypt?
Because,
I mean, all the explosives come through.
Answer that one.
Egypt's prime minister was your best friend, as you said before, that Hosni Mubarak said that Sharon is the best hope for peace, so that's why Egypt was blocking Gaza. But now that that's open, Israel will hopefully do that.
Thank you, sir. We're going to end the question there. I'm going to jump over you one more time because I've got somebody who hasn't spoken behind you, I believe. Right, young woman?
Yeah.
Okay. And are these the last two, Jen? Last two questions. Okay. We will get yours in, I promise.
Hi. So I find it extremely hypocritical that Israel considers itself a democracy, because if Israel is a democracy, then how come Palestinians don't have the freedom to vote? They don't have the freedom of speech. The IDF imposes strict checkpoints upon them. So if all of this is happening, then how do you justify that Israel is a democracy?
Israeli Arabs vote for the Knesset, and the Palestinians vote for the Palestinian Authority. And let me remind you, in 2006, the last election that the Palestinian Authority held, Hamas won, a big majority to the Hamas.
No.
It means a lot.
That's not what I'm talking about.
I mean, it shows how peaceful the Palestinians are. Because I know the Hamas charter, I learned it. And the idea is that Jews has no right at all. And that the jihad and the idea of eliminating the state of Israel is a religious, like mitzvah, how do you say it?
Yes, a religious, one of the religious tenets.
It's something that you cannot argue about. It's not, you cannot go to a religious Jew and say, okay, you can keep Shabbat, Saturday, but only half of it. I mean, so if Palestinians vote for Hamas, so I mean, it means a lot. It says something, don't you think?
No, I'm saying...
And they are voting. They voted for Hamas.
I'm talking about the Israeli government. Like, why doesn't the Israeli government give Palestinians the freedom to do anything? How come when I went to the West Bank to visit my relatives, they weren't able to go to Jerusalem with me because they're Palestinian, and they can't. And the only reason I could go is because I'm an American citizen. So, like, why? I just don't understand why.
Because they're shooting missiles constantly.
Okay, no one, stop. This is a conversation. If you want to talk among yourselves afterwards.
My question to be answered.
That's fine.
You know, if there were not so many people that choose to explode buses, you know, everything would be much easier.
Okay. Buses, okay? Exactly.
Oh.
And also.
Oh, well done.
Thank you, but I'm going to wrap up your question.
Let's forget the old buses. I mean, it was a long time ago. Sure.
In the winter of 2008, the IDF went into the Gaza Strip, killed thousands of Palestinians, and on top of that, cut off the electricity. The people could not even survive in the hospital.
You know
And
that they fire rockets on the same power
And-
station that provides them electricity?
And Israel also Israel stopped stops aid to Gaza whenever they want. Like, why is this happening? If Israel says it wants peace, I mean, peace is possible, but you have to work. Like, you have to work for it. You can't just say Palestinians can't do anything.
And now they told me
That's
both
the end of your question. That's the end of your question. Thank you.
Thank you.
As human beings, then maybe Palestinians would want to work with Israel.
Oh.
Thank you.
I mean,
Had
so
to say
why
thank you. We
did
wanna
we
get to
suffer
the last
from terror attacks during the 1950s and 60s when Palestinians had the West Bank? Why? Why? You know what? Because they never recognized our right to have our country. But
IDF is a terrorist
all right.
organization.
All right. Now,
One second.
It's a quick question.
And
The
we have
payback for a lot
one
of
last
patience is
question.
it's the last question.
I
Yes,
just wanted,
sir.
I just wanted to know your perception on after Hosni Mubarak left. What do you feel? How do you feel about the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty? Do you feel that it's gonna fall or it's gonna stay together?
I hope it's going to stay, and I'll tell you something. It's a bit of a problem. I would say the problem that when you make peace with dictatorships, as you know, all Arab states are dictatorships, you have
Don't lie, please.
you have a big problem with that, because when somebody else take power and kills the previous one, so the whole thing is you're not sure if you do have peace or not. But I think that peace is important to the Egyptians, not less than to Israel. This is the only way they could have gotten back the whole Sinai and billions of American dollars. And why wouldn't there be peace with Egypt? I mean, we don't have any border dispute or.
You've had your say, sir. Thank you. We're going to close the program now.
All right. Talk about passion.
Yeah, I mean, they told me
I would like to end this, if I may. I would like to end this on a big round of applause, with a big round of applause for everyone who showed up and participated and had the courage to say what they wanted to say. Everybody in the room. Thanks. Become a member. Buy Gilad Sharon's book. It's still out for sale out in the lobby. If you would like him to sign it, please come up this way. Thanks so much. Have a good night.